Hey guys, what's cracking? Godsman here, coming at you with some more tournament results. So this time we got some results from our recent V Revival tournament, and as many of you know down in the community, especially down the Discord, V Revival is a custom tournament, quote unquote, where we combine the pre-existing V Series card pool, which is more or less a discontinued format of Vanguard, and supplement it with our own new cards that we use via card generators and the Untap system, which allows for custom card input. This V Revival series has been going on for about a year, give or take, and it's been quite successful, as this is the 5th tournament that we've had so far, and it was the best yet, might I say. A turnout of 25 players, which is pretty good for a series like this, and a lot of varied decks and really strong competitors coming into the play with here. So I was really excited to share these results with y'all, not just to share how the tournament went and some interesting decks that were at play here and how the matchups went, but also to just kind of serve as a way to further spread the name of V Revival as this custom format that we have going on down in the Discord down below. So if you feel like playing some V, living through the nostalgic, and also seeing some new and interesting cards, this is definitely the place to do it. And while you're at it, let me just say that we've got some exciting new reveals coming for V Revival in the coming months here, so now would be a great time to come and join on in. And with all that said, let's go ahead and get into the tournament results. I hope you enjoy. So looking at the V Revival here, this is the top cut for V, and to explain how our tournaments work, because this isn't the typical Vanguard tournament system, we do a 2-deck system. So what that entails is a best of 3 where both fighters select a deck and they fight, right? And then whichever deck wins, they cannot use that deck for the rest of the match. So now they'll have to take their second deck and try to win one of the 2 following matches with it in order to win the match in general. This means that you're only as strong as your weakest link, but it also means that you get a little bit of variety in what decks you get to bring, because every player got to bring 2 decks here. So we have in order the decks ranging from the top 2 decks from the top player all the way down to 3rd and 4th place here. So this is what the top cut is. So it's not 8 players, but rather 4 players, but with 8 total decks. Anyway, with that said, let's go ahead and get into the deck list a little bit, because we had some really cool decks to show off. Now, starting off, we've got Isabelle here. Now, Isabelle is a Great Nature deck, obviously, and it's one of the V Series original decks that came out from the format. And Isabelle's main gimmick revolves around the Casino gimmick that Great Nature adopted in V Series, which allows you to discard the top card of the deck, and depending if it's a normal unit or a triggered unit, you get a different effect. However, Isabelle's main claim to fame is that she effectively rigs the system by allowing you to play both results instead of either result. And because of that, you get all sorts of like wacky combo nonsense from the deck, and it's really, really potent, especially if it gets the opportunity to go second, because immediately it gets 10,000 in the front row, and you also have that casino rig effect, or the RNG stacking, if you will. And both Isabelles are really good that way. That's their primary effect, is that. But of course, the Black Lacquer Isabelle, which came out in set 11, is the preferable choice because it gives you 10,000 in the front row and the ability to reignite an auto ability of a win place unit. So that's really strong right there. Some of the key things that you have at this deck's disposal is the Tester Fox Legion duo. This allows you to get Researcher Fox, which is a card that gets 5,000 power in Excel for each of your discarded cards, and also a really nifty ability where Tester Fox can blow it up to draw a card and give it 10,000 power in the meanwhile. But then this card also can CB1 to search for another copy of your Vanguard for your deck straight to your hand. Now, this is really important, something like Premium, of course, but in V, this is actually pretty potent too. You get a guaranteed ride next turn, which means that you get the ability to get another Excel, and on ride, this card has the ability to look at the top 3 cards of the deck and stack in any order, which means that's just another way of guaranteeing perfect casinos, and also perfect drive checks. And of course, this is an on-play skill, which means that it can copy its own on-play skill and get another deck stack 3, which I know from the player Nadote, who actually played this into the tournament, that was one of their most common choices. One of the most powerful cards of this deck is Bicard the Baku. Now, this is an energy cycler for V Series, because V Series, thanks to V Revival, actually has access to energy now. And this energy cycler, of course, when it's rode, when you ride it as a Vanguard, or when you put on a Guardian Circle from hand, you can EB3 or Counterblast 1 to draw a card. So instead of discarding for ride, if you ride it, you get that draw skicks. It's how we kind of adapt it into the V Series, relatively speaking. But the main claim to fame is the extra skill. So when you place it on the rearguard circle, as long as you rode a Vanguard over a grade 3 Vanguard during the ride phase that turn, you're able to Counterblast 1 or Energy Blast 3, and it gets the skill that when it attacks, you can stand up any of your rearguards and gets 4,000 power. At the end of the turn, you bomb that rearguard, draw a card. So the way Baku works is not only do you get draw power, but it's a multi-attack enabler, and this is in an Excel deck, which is incredibly strong, to the point where Baku actually may be on the it may be like due for an errata to disallow for that restand, because Baku has been causing quite a stir in Great Nature, relatively speaking. Now we have Nyan Shiro and Nyan Kudo. Now, both of these cards in tandem do some pretty amazing things, but nothing too amazing. It's just amazing enough to be relevant in the deck. Now, Nyan Shiro's main effect is a casino effect as well. It lets you get some more draw power and dig power, so it's a way to muster up the field and also just get some more advantage. Meanwhile, Nyan Kudo is probably the even more powerful one of the duo, because Nyan Kudo allows you to Soul Blast one at the end of battle your Isabelle Vanguard attacks in order to stand the unit in front of it in its column. So it's even more multi-attack extension on an Excel deck that gets 10,000 power here. So the main name of the game here is to guarantee front triggers and also critical triggers, of which you see we're running a hybrid rainbow lineup of triggers, because you can reliably see any of these triggers and kind of get to choose which one is optimal because of the deck stacking, right? So because of that, the player was running a 6-4-2 like split on the non-heals here, which is a really interesting way to take it, but I kind of like the flavor of it, right? Especially because one of the other new additions to this fine deck is the addition of a couple of new Sentinels. So these are from Festival Collections 1 and 2, respectively, starting with Festival Collection 1, where we get Shellmaster. Now, Shellmaster is a Fesco PG, and to briefly explain what that means is, yes, they are a main deck grade 1 PG, which is something that they have as a disadvantage compared to draw trigger PGs, but what they have as a great aside is that they have some really strong effects. So for one thing, when they guard, you only discard if you have ridden a grade 3 that fight. So if you're getting early rushed, you can PG for free from the hand. Furthermore, perhaps the most powerful feature is that they can remove another Sentinel from the drop zone in order to call themselves to the Guardian Circle from the drop zone. Now, you don't get access to the PG effect when you do this, but they are 20k shields, meaning that you get extra 20k shields by removing other Sentinels and burning them from the game. That's really nifty for just that last minute bit of defense to keep you going, and this added a lot of defensive power creep into V-Series that made games last a lot longer than they otherwise would. So super crucial, these PGs. Next up is well, what was it? Yeah, it was Finecoat Maltese was this one's name. Now, Finecoat Maltese's skill states that when it's placed on the Guardian Circle, except by a card ability, you can counterblast one in order to look at the top 5 cards of your deck, and you can call any number of them to the Guardian Circle. Now, if that sounds familiar to you, that's because it's basically a quintet wall for V-Series, but instead of forcing you to call all 5, you can choose any number of the 5 to call to Guardian Circle, which means it's less prone to deck out, and also you're not going to get any sort of overage on your guard, so you only get what you think is necessary. So a lot more control in your guarding pattern there. Furthermore, Finecoat Maltese has a skill where after you're done guarding with it, if the attack didn't hit, you can Energy Blast 3 and put any 2 cards to your drop zone on the bottom of the deck in order to draw and give 4k defensively to your Vanguard. So a bit that 4k flavor there for Great Nature, but it's defensive like heck, and it also lets you recycle back triggers back in the deck, or normal hits, depending on what you feel like you need to combo with. So some really strong guarding tools here. This is the new Fesco PG, Fesco draw trigger, the non-draw PG, and what this does is you put it into the soul from the rear circle in order to give 3,000 power to any of your units. Doesn't seem strong at first, but if you did not put another one of these into the soul this turn, you also get to draw a card. So basically you just throw it down, put it into soul, draw a card, so it's like a soul draw for free, but then you also get 3k to any unit, which can actually make the difference because you can make some really nifty numbers. For instance, your grade 3s are 12k bases, right? When you boost it by an 8k, that's 20 normally, but there are force numbers out there which are like 13k bases, but if you give them a 3k base, they become 23k columns, so that's a lot more impressive and hits that magic number that you really need in order to get the extra guard out of their opponent's hand. Finally, one thing I wanted to address is that they're running the new Fesco heal triggers. Now, these Fesco heal triggers are somewhat amalgamation of some of the D-series effect heals that we got. So what they say is when they're placed in the Guardian Circle, you can activate one of the following abilities. Ability 1 states that if your opponent's attacking unit has attacked 2 or more times this turn or was placed during the battle phase other than the beginning of the battle phase, this gets 10,000 shield, making it a 25k shield. Remember, these are 15k base shields, unlike those D-series effects where they're 10 at base, so no matter what, these are about as good as any other heal except for the normal 20k bases that you got in V, and then this just gets 10,000 shield on top of that. It's also more powerful because you can include things that are like superior called during battle phase, which which means that it addresses another key aspect of multi-attack from rear guards, and not just the typical restand multi-attack. Another thing that Spangle does is if your opponent's original critical is 2 or greater, but it wasn't increased by a critical trigger effect, then it gets a 10,000 shield from that instead. This is about the same as the D series version, but this is a little bit more potent in V series because we have access to Force 2. Force 2 being a force marker that increases the original critical of your unit to 2, which will fulfill the conditions for Refugee Spangled and the rest of the the effect heals from Festival Collection. So that's going to go over like this deck in a nutshell. Really strong beatdown deck, good combos here, so much card advantage and power going around. It's just super potent and a really strong burst, and it has one of the best going second clapbacks, right? So overall, a really solid choice here. And now let's go ahead and move on over to the other deck they brought, which was Bunny Hari. Now, Bunny Hari, as you can see, they really championed the Excel matchups in this tournament, right? Excel had kind of been falling off a little bit in V because of all like the defensive power creep that has kind of like been throwing into the circuit, but these Excel decks still know how to burst turn on the opponent really badly. So this may seem like a funky deck at first, right? Because you're taking 2 completely different archetypes and mashing them together, but there is a lot of there's a method to this madness. So the whole point is that your first grade 3 turn, I should say, you're trying to ride into Masked Magician Hari, which is the reason why this is a 4-up, because he's prioritizing getting this right as soon as possible. Now, Masked Magician Hari in V series is very unique because when it's placed on the Vanguard circle, you choose your additional rear circle, and until the end of the fight, it becomes the stage. Now, what that means is you don't get any, if you get any other Excel markers, you don't put them on other additional rear circles. Instead, you superimpose them as a stack on one stage. So all the power buffs that they get stack, and you still get the draws from Excel too. So you're just getting this one additional rear circle that's really beefy over time. And the deck has a couple different ways to get extra Excels. You either ride or you go ahead and do Starry Pop Dragon. A Starry Pop Dragon is a grade 4 that whenever you place it on the stage specifically, you get a Mastery Gift Excel, which means that you're not getting any extra attacks from it necessarily, not directly, but you do get more draw power and more power in general. It also has a win condition effect where if its power is 40,000 or greater, then it gets a critical and a Sentinel Restrict. It's not going to get a lot of power in this version of the deck because, as you may see, we're not running a Magi Dawson here, right? We're using most of the cards from the Bunny engine to supplement the bulwark of the strategy. The whole point of it is just to get more attack and also more draws and more power. And the way we get this extra attack is from Lore Pitch and Pop over here on the right side. Lore Pitch and Pop states that at the end of the battle that it attacks on the stage, you can CB1 and return it to the hand in order to superior call your Starry Pop Dragon. So you just attack without the stage. It's going to get pretty decently powerful because the stage is stacking those 5k bonuses from Excel 2. You bounce it back to the hand with the CB, and then you go ahead and call Starry Pop, get another draw off of that. So you're going like plus 2 to the hand effectively. And then after that, Starry Pop could then swing, and if you've got a lot of power on it, it can get the restrict. Now, one of the things to kind of guarantee the power there is your turn 4 ride, which is Tialapse. Now, Tialapse's skill states that you counterblast 1 and put 2 cards from hand to soul to call 2 cards from your soul to the rear circle, and then you choose one of your Beast Tamers, and that unit's circle becomes a Vanguard circle. You have a couple really key targets for this, right? The most notable one being Clarina down here, where Clarina on Vanguard circle gets the opportunity to put a card from hand to soul when it attacks in order to call a card to rear circle, another multi-attack. Dodote here loves their Excel beatdown multis, and it shows because that's not even where it ends. Clarina also has the skill that as long as you got 3 or more bunnies in your soul or rear circle cumulatively, this gets an extra drive, meaning that you get 2 twin drives total. These 2 twin drives combined with Teolapse's continuous to also give 1,000 power to your front row for each of your bunnies that you've accumulated, of which you've got this bunny from Amazing Bunny, you've got this bunny, and then Brassy Bunny, and then this is of course the grade 3 Searcher Bunny. So you've got approximately 11 targets if I'm reading this right, and that's pretty strong. So you could get like a pretty decent front row buff that is helping this out, and of course you've got four drive checks total to try and fish out for critical triggers. No front triggers here. We're going for pure critical on this one, and for good reason, because you've got a nice guard restrict win condition going out here as the coup de grace to your attack patterns. So they're trying to fish for that and keep the they're also trying to keep the lethality of the Vanguard swings, so you get 2 Vanguard swings effectively intact by having as much criticals as you could to punish. They have 9 criticals total because we're including another crit sentinel, right? A nice little flavorful addition right there. So yeah, between all these drive checks, the front row power up, and the progressively stronger stage, so this is really strong win condition. One other thing to note is Bunny Queen Beast Tamer. Now, Bunny Queen Beast Tamer has the skill to soul blast a couple cards in order to call itself to the rear circle from the soul, which means you get more field flooding, and on top of that Bunny Queen Beast Tamer. That's a mouthful to say continuously. Try saying that 3 times in a row. You can convert your column into soul in order to get a counter charge and drop. So basically, it's a great way to build back resources, get field presence there consistently, and just puts in a lot of extra grease on the gears that are turning for this system to work. Final thing of note for this deck is the Knife Strike Pardos. Now, this is the ride fixer, as they've been dubbed from V series. Now, this is because the archetypal second skills, where if you gave your ride phase, your Vanguard is grade 1 or less, you can discard them to look at the top 5 and add a grade 2 or less card from the top 5 to the hand. This is not really what it's meant for. It's a nice consistency bonus, of course, but the main thing about this deck is when it attacks while boosted, you CB1 to soul charge that you call a card with a different name from your soul to rear circle. It's just more multi-attack. And one of the things they could do is it could fish out like a couple of cards that are stuck with the soul, like Lord Pigeon Pop, and like Lord Pigeon Pop being the big one, because I can then fish out your Starry Pop Dragon, because the bunnies don't really interact with the non-bunnies at all. The bunnies are just meant to give you a lot of power and drive checks and just overall field propagation, right? So that's what this deck is all about. You got a lot of the usual suspects: Fesco Heal, you've got Fesco PG, you've got Effect Draw, like a lot of just good stuff here. Overall, super devastating. It's got one of the best burst turns in the format right now, but it can be really janky to set up, especially if you don't see your optimal rides in time, because you're not setting up stage, you're not making Starry Pop great, and especially if you don't see Tialapse at all, then you're not going to get hardly any offense, like, frankly speaking. So it's very gimmicky, it's prone to jank, but when it goes off, it feels like the best deck out there. So that's going to do it for those two. Let's go ahead and move on over to another one of the top 4s, which was Amaruda. Now, Amaruda is one of the new Genesis decks that have released in V Revival, and it's one of my favorites because this really emulates the old style of Amaruda and her version of Revelation when she came out in G-Next. Now, there's a lot of new cards to explain here, so I think what I'm going to do to make this simple, because this deck is more or less emulated off of mine, let me just go ahead and go through these one at a time from top to bottom. So, and of course, ignoring starter, because it's just a starter, right? So let's go ahead and start with Amaruda. Now, Amaruda has 3 very strong skills. The first one being that whenever your unit, which includes herself, is placed during your turn, so it can be placed on Vanguard Circle, it can be placed on Rearguard Circle, at any time during your turn. When it's placed, you look at the top card of the deck and either put it into the soul or it stays on top of the deck. It's like Revelation, but it doesn't have the rest downside. The second skill says that for the cost of removing an imaginary gift force, yes, you're actually removing a force marker, you draw a card and all of your units will get continuous 5,000 power. And this isn't at the moment, it's including any units that you place after the fact on the rear or Vanguard Circle. There's no way to put on Vanguard Circle, so you're just calling them the rear circle afterwards. It's a way to not only draw key cards that you saw at the top of your deck from Revelation, but cumulatively speaking, you can get a maximum value of 30,000 power if you've got 3 full columns. So even though you're having to get rid of the long-term viability that comes with force marker stacking, it's probably worth it to get that immediate power, but it does incentivize you to keep riding or to use the skill. Otherwise, if you can't keep riding, you're going to run a little bit right. But in order to assist in helping that endeavor, we've got Battle Maiden Asasa. When Asasa is placed on the Vanguard rear circle, she gets 5,000 power. Then if you rode her, you can put a card from hand to soul to search your deck drop or soul for Prime Beauty Amaruda and write it as stand. So when you ride this, by the way, Asasa then calls herself to rear circle. So basically, by negging 1 in the hand to soul, you can replace the ride with Amaruda and then call out Asasa to rear circle, which is a break-even ride fix for Amaruda. So fantastic. And remember, right, because of how this works with Amaruda, you're going to get Revelation off of this call as well, so you can immediately get some of your deck stacks going. So really strong. This also is a 10k interceptor on the rear circle and in the hand, so you get a nice 10k body to defend with and also an 18k attacker at base. Just really good stuff for Amaruda. Perfect consistency and just covers your bases, so definitely optimal to run 4 of each of these. Then we got 4 Nino. Now Nino has a very basic skill on the Vanguard rear circle that when it's placed, as long as you've got a Fenrir or Amaruda Vanguard, this is important because a few of these cards are actually locked to either Amaruda or Fenrir, so they're not going to be generic to the whole clan. Thank God, because they're uber powerful. But for those 2 subclans in particular, these are kind of nuts. Now, she does state that when you do place her, if you got one of those 2 Vanguards, you look at the top 2 cards of the deck and you arrange them on any order, then you may soul charge 1. So effectively think of it as like put 1 into the soul, leave the other on top. But if you like both of your cards, you can just leave them on top and not bother with the soul charge, right? This is a little funny because it can combo very well with Amaruda, because what you do is you place Nino, you resolve Amaruda, look at the top card, do whatever you want with it, and then you do Nino. So let's say you Amaruda, look at the top card, you put in the soul, and then you do Nino. You're effectively scrying 3 right there. That's a really nice dig. And also soul build. She also has a secondary skill in the soul where you can counterblast one to call her to the rear circle from the soul if you've got, you know, one of the 2 appropriate Vanguards, take your guess which ones, and she gets boosted 3000 power, so she becomes a 13k booster right there. And because she's calling herself out, you get to look at the top 2, so very worth the CV right there. Just so much functionality here. Then we've got Kotonoha. Now this is a fan favorite, and for good reason, because I love this art. Now Kotonoha's skill is somewhat reminiscent of her old version where she did a lot of power stacking every time you were doing your gimmick. In this case, Kotonoha has a continuous skill that says she gets 2000 power for each card that was put into your soul this turn, right? So very reminiscent, but whereas Kotonoha like distinctly between religion and not on how big her power up was, we just gave it the flat 2k because it makes sense. Furthermore, if you've got Amaruda or Fenrir, she can't be chosen by card effects, so she is a really beefy attacker that also can kind of fight back against control, which is good because it is a very piece reliant combo oriented deck, so it would suck to lose Kotonoha. Finally, Kotonoha has an on-hit skill. When it does hit a Vanguard, you're able to Soul Blast 1 to do one of 2 things. You can either retire one of your opponent's rear guards and give 5000 power to one of your units, or you can draw a card. Now, this is crucial because Amaruda has very specific deck stacking abilities. With the exception of Nino, you're only looking at 1 card at a time, and as a result, you may want to draw that card or keep that card. If it's a trigger, then you're going to want to opt for the effect which gives you power and retire. Even if the retire is useless, the power will be good. This is particularly good when you're attacking before Amaruda, because I'm about to explain Amaruda's 3rd skill here, and it'll bring everything together. Now, Amaruda will want this to do the retire power first because Amaruda has a final skill I didn't mention, right? So heading back over to her, when Amaruda attacks the Vanguard, you can Soul Blast 3 cards, and you choose 3 of your rear guards that give 5000 power. That's not all though. If you Soul Blasted 3 different grades, and your opponent's grade 3 or greater, you can counterblast 1 to stand those chosen units. So if this sounds familiar, it's because it's emulating Goddess of Investigation Ishtar from G-Series. That stride also let you stand a bunch of rear guards there and give them power in the process. This is giving them power and stands. You're only going to do 3 maximum, of course, at any given time, but that's perfectly fine because that's a really strong beatdown. Now, the reason why I say it's important to interlope this right there is, so if it's prior to the stand and you've got like a critical, you may as well get the power because then Amaruda can double dip it. So it's really prudent to swing with Kotonoha first because you can double dip on the power, and by swinging with an on hit first, you're kind of punishing your opponent for wanting to chance for a defensive right off the bat in your 5 attack pattern, because this is a really strong 5 attack deck. So really cool there. But let's say that you hit after the restands, right? After the restands, you probably don't have a deck stack going on, and because of that, Kotonoha is just free to draw a card for a Soul Blast. So it's really versatile, and you adjust based on what your deck stack is, what your opponent decides to do, and how your board is setting up. So it's really good. I love how this one was designed. Now, next up, we've got Battle Maiden Medusa. Battle Maiden Medusa is the energy cycler, so I'm not going to explain the archetypal energy effect, but its unique effect, which has the same basic condition of if you rode a a Vanguard over a grade 3 during the ride phase, you're able to Energy Blast 1 or Counterblast, Energy Blast 3 or Counterblast 1, I'm talking a lot here, in order to add a card from your soul back to your hand, but you can soul charge 2 before doing this effect. So you can get a couple in the soul and then add 1 back. Think of it as like Gleipnir, right? Now, it's slower Gleipnir, but you can actually build soul beforehand, like 2 soul instead of 1 from Gleipnir's soul charge, and you have the option to Energy Blast 3 instead of paying that admittedly kind of hefty Counter Blast 1. So Medusa just feels like a more quality compared to Gleipnir, albeit Gleipnir is faster, and Gleipnir does have the Soul Blast 1 for 10,000 power, so we didn't outright power creep Gleipnir, but this is still really good, and one of your best ways to use energy in this deck. Next up, we have Kibitsu Hime. This one, like I said, this one's going to take a lot of explanation because all of these cards you see right here, released in the most recent set for V Revival, and they're just all viable immediately for this deck. They're so good. This is Kibitsu Hime. Now, Kibitsu Hime on the rear circle, once per turn, can, when you put a card into your soul by any means, you can bot deck that put card in order to give one of your units 5,000 power, and then it bounces back to hand. This is like a soul blast because it's getting rid of a card from your soul, but it's bot decking it, so you get recycle, and also you're gonna get 5,000 power and bounce it back. So it's like it's a cost that's somewhat helpful. And You get a lot of benefits, so just really simple and strong that way, especially if you have to like revelation in a trigger unit and then just be like, nah fam, put that in back of deck. Real good. Its second effect is a Guardian Circle skill, where when it's placed in the Guardian Circle, you can Revelation, which means just look at the top card of the deck, right? So it's a nice basic Guardian skill, which is reminiscent of the Revelation skill that Kibitsu Hime had, which was the Revelation PG from GNX. And it's just nice, simple, good stuff. But its main claim to fame is to give the power to cycle back cards and also be a bouncing card, which means it can get around some control and is also just an extra shield for you. Now, this is Awanami. Awanami is your grade 1, like, ride target of choice because it has a skill in the soul that when your Vanguard with Fenrir Amaruda is placed during the ride phase, you can call her to the rear circle if you don't have another copy of her right there. So she is a free call for the soul every turn, and of course, because of the timing, it will proc Amaruda's Revelation. Neat. And then she has a secondary skill where at the end of the turn, if she stood by the ability of your Vanguard, you can put her into the soul to add a greater or greater card from your soul back to the hand. This is so crucial because this not only makes it a viable, optimal target for a back row restand for Amaruda, but it means that you can add back all sorts of nifty tools. Let's say they had a revelation in like another Amaruda or an Azusa. Well, putting that to the hand means you can guarantee your ride to get those force markers like I was talking about before. You can get your energy cycler back from extra defense. You could try to get Kotonoha as a good beater there. You could try to get Nino so that you can call it in case CB's a little tight, so you don't want to call her for the soul directly. You just call it, right? So many strong targets in this deck. Really strong card. Now, finally, let me talk about Toka here. The last one of this deck, I swear, guys. Now, Toka has 2 skills. Now, Toka's first skill states that at the end of the battle that it attacked or boosted, you can Energy Blast 3 and move it into the soul to draw a card, look at the top card of the deck, and you put it on the top or bottom of the deck. So this is basically Nilberis, for those of you who know what that card does in Rezile. This is Nilberis as a grade 1, but it can also be done while boosting. Really good there. The second skill says that when you Soul Blast it, you can bind this card if you have not bound it this fight. So in other words, it's like a once per fight skill effectively. So think of it as like Goyusha and Dayusha in standard. If you don't have another one that's bound, you can use this skill. You bind it to take a card from your drop zone, either put it in the soul or put it on the bottom of the deck. So a very limited once per fight recycle, but still a recycle nonetheless. It either pays you back soul, or if you're trying to put back a trigger, you can put back a trigger. But it originally was a lot stronger than this, but it had to be nerfed because there's just too much easy recursion. Genesis was getting mad recycles like left and right, dude. I mean, it was crazy. So we had to nerf that quite a bit, and that's one of the great things about V Revival is because we can design the cards and adjust them on the fly, like online, based on community feedback and how the tournaments would go. We're kind of like an online card game, right? Think of it as like Vanguard Zero, where Vanguard Zero can also errata cards and pull cards from outside the deck. We have that at our liberty as well, right? So there's a lot of freedom in design and adjustment. We don't have to commit to erroneous card designs or mistakes in retrospect, right? We can change them. So it makes a really healthy format. And yeah, I guess one thing to quickly note is this right here. This is Dromi. Dromi, when Soul Blasted, bot decks 2 normal units to give you 5k power and also counter charges 1. So it's just a counter charge for the deck. Pretty solid counter charger because you do CB for a couple of powerful cards, most particularly Amaruda every turn. So yeah, overall, strong beatdown deck. A lot of cycling, a ton of tools at its disposal, and so many like soul-oriented, top deck-oriented combos that it'll make your head spin if you're not prepared. Really cool deck here, base choice. Now the other one that Anak brought to play was Overlord. Now this is not going to require too much explanation, thankfully, by comparison. So let me just explain the new cards here, because that's going to be the big one. I'll explain the new cards and I'll explain the boss unit. So the boss unit is Dragonic Overlord, the Rebirth, right? Now the Rebirth locks all of your rear guards in order to get the skill to restand at the end of its first battle by CB and discard 1. It keeps its twin drive. Then at the end of the battle that it attacks, you can discard 2 cards if you have 4 or more damage and 5 or more lock cards in order to restand it and get an extra get forth. It still keeps the twin drive. So you're looking at a 3 Vanguard attack turn with 6 drive checks, right? And it's going to be really beefy because the extra force markers or whatever triggers that you threw on it, right? That's not all though. We now have Dragonic Overlord Zabreaking Point. Now the breaking point skill states that when it attacks on Vanguard Circle or is rode upon, you choose your Overlord Vanguard and it gets the skill to CB1 to discard 2 at the end of the battle. It attacks to restand itself, right? and it keeps the twin drive unless your opponent's Vanguard is grade 2, in which case it loses the drive, so that you don't get like mad drive pressure on a grade 2 Vanguard and bully them in the early game. That was a very necessary errata, right? But still, when you break ride the Rebirth over the breaking point, you get 4 Vanguard attacks. Each of these Vanguard attacks are going to be at bare minimum 43k, because the 10,000 power and the 2 force markers, they've all got twin drive. And on top of that, one thing I didn't even mention about the Rebirth is whenever it attacks, you can Soul Blast one to retire to your opponent's rear guards, and this isn't once per turn, it's every time you attack. So you could field wipe like 6 to 8 rear guards as well, potentially, if your opponent was like playing Excel or whatever and had a full field. So just massive control, huge Vanguard swings, and even if that attack pattern doesn't somehow kill your opponent, next turn you can still do 3 Vanguard attacks. Yeah, it's really easy. It's really strong. It's a deck that even after some minor nerfs is still kind of like in a position to potentially get even more nerfs, because the Rebirth just does a little bit too much, right? Because it destroys the guarding fundamentals of Vanguard, because everything is going to be this hefty Vanguard swing. Then you know that, you know, the classic Kagero drive pressure. I mean, just look at this man. He's running 10 critical triggers. He's going to be checking one of them at some point, right? And that's going to, like, the earlier he checks it, the more it stacks up. And now we've got Wyvern Strike Plaudry here to kind of intensify that issue, because Plaudry doesn't just retire an opponent's rear guard, but you can CP1 and remove your starting Vanguard. So these are Festival Collection grade 3s that are effectively once per fight as well, because you only have one starting Vanguard to remove. By doing that, your Vanguard's original critical becomes 2 into end of the turn. So yeah, if you combo that with this break range, you get all 3 of these cards here. Oh my god, dude. Now, I did receive a note from Anak, who played this deck, that he kind of regressed on playing more Plaudry, and I can get a see why, because that would absolutely dominate a lot of his matchup. So next up, we have Energy Cycler. We already know basic Energy Cycler skill. The unique effect states that you can retire your opponent's rear guards and draw a card. So a nice holistic +2, but at bare minimum, you're just getting draw and retire. Really strong. This one is Whirlmandry. Now, Whirlmandry's skill states that when it's discarded by your Vanguard, it can count as 2 discards, and as well as that, it can call itself to the rear circle. And if you call it to the rear circle at the end of the turn, it's got to move itself in the soul. So it's very much like that one Overlord promo that we had back in the day, right? The one that counts as 2 discards, so you can kind of superior call it as a booster mid-battle. This is the exact same thing here that we did with Whirlmandry. Now, the downside is that it has to move in the soul afterwards, so it's not like you're going to get that permanent plus, but I mean, just the fact that it counts as 2 discards is already like a vicarious +1, right? So that's really strong. This doesn't combo as well with the Rebirth, because ideally you're not going to have any rear circles that are open to you to call the Whirlmandry from, but even just as a free discard fodder, that is really nice, right? And if you're doing it with the breaking point, well, that's where the real value comes in, right? Because then the breaking point does have zones to use. So really, really good stuff overall. Now, probably one of the MVPs of Kagero in general is Absalom. Now, Absalom is a retrain of that G Guardian that Kagero had way back when, and it's now been retrained into a grade 1 normal unit. And what does it do? Well, at the end of your turn, if your opponent has 2 or less rear guards, you can return it to the hand for free. Then, if you have 6 or less cards in hand, you can Soul Blast 1 to draw a card. So basically, it's a nice way to add early aggression to Kagero, and on top of that, gets you more card advantage if you're looking a little low on card advantage. This thing really slaps hard in the early games, but that's not all, because there's a point to it bouncing back, which is that when it's put on the Guardian Circle, you can CB1, and for each of your opponent's open rear circles, he gets 10,000 power, very much just like the original Absalom. But if you have 1 or less open rear circles, like the opponent has 1 or less open rear circles, you get to draw a card. So 1 or 2 things are going to happen. You're either going to throw it down and it'll get you a draw and maybe 10,000 shield, or you have upwards of like 50,000 shield on it or something like that. It just depends on when your opponent's committing to the field. And I mean, if they don't have a lot to give, because, you know, this board wipe kind of goes hard, dude, then this is going to be a massive shield, which is so worth its CB, right? So yeah, just a really, really strong early game card and fantastic Guardian. Just shores up a couple of the weaknesses of Kagero all around. The rest of the cards just really speak for themselves, right? You've got Fesco stuff with the PG, the draw trigger, crap ton of criticals. One thing to note is that there are no grade 3 heal guardians. The reason being is that this is a limit break deck, so they actually kind of want to take a lot of damage in the early game and get rushed down, because that allows Overlord to go for its smackdown immediately. As a matter of fact, that tactic right here of taking the smackdown immediately and clapping back actually allowed this deck to defeat Isabelle, right? By just going for the hard punish with the Reapers. So that was a fight that happened, and that was very interesting to watch. So do not underestimate the Reaper. You give a lot of damage, it sure will use that damage. Anyway, real good show here. Now we're gonna move on to one of the finalist decks. This is Malcus Malik. Now, Malcus Malik, this is a really blurry image, so sorry for that, chat, but thankfully Malcus Malik doesn't need a lot of explanation here, because there's hardly any there's hardly any V Revival cards here. They're basically just at base cards, with just some typical generics, because Malcus Malik didn't receive dedicated support in the past couple ways of V, right? So the main thing that Malcus Malik does is it is a Protect 2 deck. Now, for those who don't know, Protect 2 is a Protect marker that goes on with your rear circles. Anything on that Protect marker gets 5,000 power at all times, and also 10,000 shield at all times. So that is both offensively and defensively for the power. The thing that Malcus Malik makes that good for is it has a skill that states that all of your units on one of those protect markers cannot be retired by effect. So really strong protection to kind of bypass one of the weaknesses of Protect 2, which is control. On top of that, Malcus Malik also has a beefy 10,000 power to the front row, and the original Malcus Malik has the ability to revive 3 cards to the drop zone for a mere Soul Blast every turn. Now, you have the damage ping yourself as a downside, but because of Shin Malcus Malik, by discarding a card when he's damage checked, you just ride him over original Malcus. And one thing that's kind of interesting about this deck, and one thing that the player kind of like did that was ingenious. Now, normally there are a couple cards here, right? Like Holy Lord Angel and also this Angel, right? Now, they're supposed to stack your Malcus Malik on the deck, but you don't have to do it for specifically this damage ping. You could damage ping whatever the frick you want, and then later on stack this and then use Jafkiel's skill in order to damage ping Malcus, and that just kind of like makes it up, because this will add a card from your damage zone to your hand anyway, so you still went net neutral on damage regardless, and this will like give you something in the hand to make up for the discard. So really strong, and because you're riding, you're getting extra protect marker. The real linchpin here for win conditions, because it's a super grindy tanky deck, and that's something you're gonna notice about all these decks that like kind of made like the top 2, is they're really grindy. So you've got like a lot of beatdown aggression, but beatdown aggression kind of like faltered in the face of like raw defense, because we're in a little bit of a slower meta. V series kind of has a lot of defensive power creep at the moment, but anyway, I digress. So it's this card right here, which is an Amputation Angel. Now, this card right here has the skill that states that if it's on there's a marker in its column, it gets 15,000 power. So that would be a protect marker. So already a 29k beater on a protect marker. Then when continuously, if you have 3 or more protect markers on your circles, you can deny sentinels. It has a sentinel restrict for free. It doesn't get rid of itself. It doesn't see if you're paying any resources. It just has that at all times. If you have 2 of these suckers out on the field, that's really good. And the Sentinel restrictions don't stop there, because we're also running a Feather Palace. Now, Feather Palace Soul blasts 2 grade 3s and also flips down all of your cards in your damage zone in order to get 20,000 power and a critical and a Sentinel restrict. Because of the constant rewrites of Malcus, it's really easy to get these grade 3s in the Soul, right? And more or less guaranteed, because you're able to do a lot of like deck stack and search shenanigans like Holy Lord Angel and whatnot. So yeah, you got the Sentinel restricts abound, which makes the power of the Protect 2 even more viable. Having said that though, it's pretty tanky, but its offense is very slow. And on top of that, Malcus Malik is vulnerable to field control that isn't based around retire. One of the most devastating matchups this deck can face is Narukami, which allows you to bind both field and also drop zone. That's just absolutely insane, and Narukami would more or less just auto win in a matchup against Malcus Malik. But even then, like, it's strong piling that really propels this deck forward, and the guy who played this, Kaito, was probably one of the best pilots I've ever seen for Malcus, right? Which is one of the reasons why he made it so far. As I said before though, not a lot of like revival stuff. You're just looking at Fesco PG, Fesco draw, Fesco heal, just your basic fundamentals. One last thing I guess I should note is that it does have a very beat Angel here, which can intercept as with an extra 5k shield. So it's a 15k base intercept if it's got a marker, which means that really it's a 25k intercept, and it gets a bit of power and some cycle here, and it can intercept from the back row. So let's just take this at candid value, right? You've got 2 protect markers. Those 2 protect markers are going to get you a 15k intercept and a 25k intercept. That's just a free 40k shield. I do mean free, because you just revive these back next turn, right? That's one of the big linchpins to this. Really strong tank deck. No surprises have made it all the way up here. Now, next up is probably the more crazy of the two decks that Kaito brought. Now, this is Loris. Now, Loris is probably due for a couple of erratas and after this tournament right here. But let me go ahead and explain what this deck was all about prior. So, first off, this is Miracle Voice Loris, so yay, right? This is the card that Bushiroad forgot about in V-Series. They never gave us Loris for some reason, despite the G-Boot being a thing, right? So we decided, you know what, we'll do it ourselves. So we have Loris with a whole bunch of different support cards, and I'll quickly just go over what this is. The fundamental premise is that Loris combines the Pseudo-Strider effect of V-Series with the Harmony gimmick of Yor. So its main primary ability states that you counterblast 1 and discard a card as an act to search your deck for a grade 4 card and write it as stand. Now, that may seem a little more expensive because your C being 1, but the discard can be anything. It doesn't have to be grade 3 or greater's worth. And also, the grade 4s, these can include grade 4s with force markers. So you're immediately getting a second force marker with Loris. That's a lot of power, right? And on top of that power, there's some really devastating grade 4s here, of which we've got 3 to talk about. We've got Olivia. Olivia will let you restand all of your board as long as your board is different card names, rear guards only. But the Vanguard does get a critical. So the Vanguard does restand, you still get a critical on her, and also you get a whole board restand. So it's remarkably feels a lot like what Amaruda was trying to achieve, albeit it's free and requires very little setup. Then you've also got probably the most busted card in this deck, right? Which is Eve. Now, Crystal Popstar Eve has the skill that's not once per turn to look at the top card of the deck, and you may call it to an open rear circle. So the way this deck works is you just constantly keep spamming to open rear circles, and then with certain cards, you can bounce those cards back to the hand, and then whenever you check a trigger, you can either double the power or the critical effect of that trigger. So it can break through guards really easily. It makes your column super huge, and it's just something you can play down like as soon as turn 3, even against a grade 2. It's really nuts. And then finally we have the main win condition of the deck, which is your Celebrate Voice Loris. Now, Celebrate Voice Loris will Energy Blast 3 in order to bounce back all of your rear guards to the hand, and it gets a drive when you do this. If you bounce back 3 or more, you get this drive. Then if you bounce back 5 or more, you're able to Soul Blast 1 in order to get the skill that during its battle, all of your opponent's guardians cannot activate their auto abilities, right? Now, this is very specific because yes, it stops like normal PG conventions and also certain like guardian skills that certain cards, like I'll use an example from earlier, right? Like Ibitsu Hime's like hold look at top card stick couldn't work against this. Neither could T-Break Angel's like heal trigger effects. Not that it would anyway, a little preview there. Now, the thing is that it doesn't stop a lot of other things. It doesn't stop continuous power-ups and shields, and it also doesn't stop Fesco PGs from the drop zone because their auto ability to call themselves the Guardian Circle's 20k shielders activate in the drop zone, technically not as Guardians, so they can still bypass this. So you still have some strong like do-arounds, and of course there's also critical Sentinels, which are just 30k base Sentinels, because it's not Sentinel restricting, it's just restricting auto abilities on Guardians. And it also gives 5,000 power to all of your units that was placed this turn. That includes itself, so you're probably getting about 30,000 power with that, and then it's a really strong 3 attack turn. As a matter of fact, with the exception of Olivia, this is just a 3 attack deck, but oh boy, you get a lot of value. Like Eve is like a +5. This is an auto restrict right here, but like Eve is really the main problem because it gives this deck a lot of free plussing, right? But aside from that, it becomes super piece reliant. But with those piece reliancies, you get some really strong like win conditions on board, right? Loris also has a second skill where when a unit is placed in her column, you can Soul Blast 1 to bounce a card and then draw a card if you give 2 units 5,000 power. So the reason why that works is because it's not just a harmony skill to call in her column, but it also means that when you ride over, that's technically another unit being placed in her column because riding is still placing, right? So it's also a Strider skill. You see, it's kind of clever, right? Now you've got like the bulwark of the support cards. We'll just go through this very quickly one at a time. So Amelia has the effect when it's wrote upon by Loris to call itself to the field or draw a card. And then whenever something is placed in its column, you can CP1, look at the top 3 cards of the deck, add 1 to the hand, and shuffle. If you didn't add 1, you draw instead. Marioneer is your main beatdown. Whenever it's placed on the rear circle, you get 5,000 power. But if you got a Loris, your opponent's grade 3 or greater, you can get 5,000 power for every 2 of your units instead. So it's kind of like emulating Marioneer's old school where scale to how full your board was, and you can get a 15k like plus on this for a 25k beater at base. That's really good. Also, it can't be chosen by card effects because we love beaters that like to stick around. This is Vita. Now, Vita's skill states when something's placed in its column, she gets 3,000 power and boost, and you may soul charge 1, gets you soul, and it's a nice booster. Good stuff. Then at the end of the turn, by bot decking it, you can choose 2 of your rear guards, bounce it back to the hand, so it gives you a lot of that classic Bermuda bouncing, but it's at the end of the turn, so you need to wait. It can't be a part of Eve combos, thankfully, otherwise we'd have even more problems than we already do with this. Now, this right here is Izumi. Izumi is your energy cycler. We already know what energy cyclers do. So the unique effect states that you can give one of your units 5,000 power. Then if you choose a rear guard, you bounce it back at end of turn. So it's just like Prescia back from Dia series. This is Shandy. Now Shandy states that when something is placed in its circle, if that unit is placed on a rear circle, then you can return your rear guards back to the hand. This is really good for looping with Eve. But if you place it on the Vanguard circle, you can discard a card to add a lore. So that would be if you ride over it, or if it's on the back row center and it's seasoned in the Vanguard replaced, you can discard to add Loras. So this cycle without your Loras is really easy. Another one of the most powerful cards in this deck is Metadu. Whenever Metadu sees something placed in its column, you can bot deck a card for your drop zone of any kind and give that unit 5,000 power. Furthermore, when your Loras attacks or is attacked, you can put it into the soul to give that Loras 10,000 power to end that battle. And if you didn't countercharge, you countercharge one. This is your countercharger. It's mid-battle. It can be defensive or offensive depending on whether you prioritize power during your turn or your opponent's turn. Then you've got Sedna. This looks at top 5 to add a grade 3, and there's something in its column that gets 5,000 power continuously. It's just grade 3 searcher, good stuff there. And then of course we got the Fesco lineup. So overall, deck is super toolboxy. You have lots of ways to get plussing. Your harmonies will work with each other to get so much deck filtering, resource game, and power. It's just got like all the pillars here. Now what I will say for the audience out here is that the restricted errata list is upcoming, and it's very likely that Eve is going to get choice restricted with Loras, so that this card can't, because this card shouldn't be thrown down immediately. It should be hard written into, because of just how abjectly powerful it is compared to most of the other grade 4s, right? So we are probably going to throw that restriction in place, and Metadu may also be errated to only put back normal units, because what the player did during this tournament is constantly put back trigger units, and when you combine it with all the deck filtering and draw power, that became a little bit problem in late game. So it might need to be snipped in the bud, but regardless, those couple of notes aside, really strong, excellently built list. If anyone wants to play Loras and V Revival, this is definitely the list that I would take for the time being, minus whatever adjustments would be made to the ban list, in which case you can just ask people for advice on what to do instead, right? Because you have basically the whole of Bermuda is your oyster with how generically viable Loras is. And then finally, we got the 2 decks that I ran. All right, so here's Shiran Newui. This deck is really funny because it only had 1 direct support card in V Revival, and man, it took off as a result. I love this deck to death. I think it's one of the most fascinating decks to play, right? So the centerpiece of this deck is the new grade 4. You heard me right. It's a main deck grade 4 unit, which is Evil Eye Hades Empress Shiran Newui Mukuro. Now, Shiran Newui Mukuro's skill states that all of your Mask of Domination token cannot be affected by your opponent's card effects, nor leave the rear circle by a card's ability, and you perform drive checks for them. So this means that you have an invincible Mask of Domination token that also can perform drive checks regardless of how many Shiran Newui you have in the soul. And the reason why is because we're going to be getting rid of the Shiran Newui in the soul. Let me explain as I read the rest of this. So the second skill states that when it's placed by riding over a grade 3 Shiran Newui, so it's specifically when you initially ride into grade 4, you choose a card for your opponent's rear circle or drop, and you bind it. You call a Mask of Domination token, which is this little sucker right here, and it's basically just a generic whatever. It's a blank canvas for Shiran Newui to ride all over with, right? And when you bind a unit and call Mask of Domination token to your back row center, that unit is going to get the original grade, power, critical, and abilities of whatever card you bound, and it can attack for the back row center column. So you kind of get to dominate a unit by taking all of their properties for your Mask of Domination token. This can include things like their abilities, and probably one of the most important thing is that this includes the Twin Drive ability. So if you bind a grade 3 or greater, you get the Twin Drive for 4 drive checks cumulatively. This grade 3 only has the Twin Drive because it gives you a marker. So you're at max, normally you should only be looking at 4 drives per turn if your opponent gives you the grade 3 or greater to do, right? Now, in addition to that, once per turn is an axe skill, Shiran Newui can put up to 2 Shiran Newuis from your hand or soul into the drop. So think of it as something like Bastion Prime and how Bastion Prime's cost works, right? For each one put, you choose another card for your opponent's rear circle or drop, bind them, and your Mask of Domination token inherits all of their abilities and power until the end of the fight. This Mask of Domination token lasts until the end of the fight. It only gets stronger the later the game goes on. And my meta call, right, because I believe V is a really like grindy like meta right now, where a lot of the best decks are really good defensively speaking, and like the toolboxing just gives us so many ways to survive, right? I thought, you know what, let me go ahead and abuse that property and bring an anti-control, anti-grind meta deck into this, which was Shiran Newui, and it worked. For the most part, it worked splendidly, right? It did take a couple of L's because these are best of threes, right? So I took an L with it, but still managed to make it to top cut anyway, because the next deck we're going to talk about actually went undefeated and just hard carried the whole event, by the grace of God, might I say. So this is even the more powerful of the two, in my opinion. This card right here, just your Mask of Domination token by turn 3 is probably looking at the ballpark of like 20 to 30k power or something like that, but and that's only because of a couple of other helpful little goobers in the deck there. But then it could get like 30, 40, 50, 60k. It just crescendos out of control, right? And depending on what you're binding, their abilities could be really useful, because there are like certain generic abilities that you could use. Like for instance, right, one generic ability that you could use is you could use the generic ability of Tester Fox to Soul Blast 1 and give something 10,000 power, right? That's a really good generic ability that you can use. Another generic ability that you could use is a couple of these cards right here. So for instance, right, the Kotonoha skill could actually work as a beatdown card. You also have access to the Malcus Malik, where you know how Amputation Angel has a Sentinel Restrict. Well, you could make Protect 2s. So if they give you an Amputation Angel, you could just straight up get Sentinel Restrict on your token every time it battles. Yeah, that's really good. You could get all sorts of harmony abilities. And remember, riding means that you place something in their column. So if you could ride on the Mikudo, you can use a lot of these harmony abilities. Just so many good targets here, right? Now a couple other elements of the deck, because I played a lot of tricksy stuff in this deck that's worth noting. Now Shiran Newui Oboro and Shiran Newui respectively are kind of like a duo, where Shiran Newui discards a card to ride into Oboro from the deck. So for a discard, you not only do you fix your ride, but you also get to like generate 2 protect markers total for the turn. That compared with Bukuro means you're getting 3 protects in a fight, and so you have to use them wisely. Now Oboro also gets you your Mask of Domination token. It has the ability to drive check. You have 2 or more Shiran Newuis in the soul, which the best way to do it is to use Shiran Newui's other skill on Rearguard Circle to put it into the soul to draw, and then make your opponent bounce discard, right? This card though is only a temporary token, so be careful what you bind, because if you prefer it to be on the permanent token, then you don't want to bind that. That's one thing that makes like Bukuro a little tricky to use, because you have to be very conscious about what to do. And it also means that your opponent has like a lot of time to say what you can and can't get, because there's a lot of like recycling and like field manipulation going on in this meta right now. So it's a little hard for Shiran Newui to snipe the correct targets if your opponent's conscientious of it, but that's why you have to kind of like back them in the corner. So a couple cards that'll help back in the corner. This card is a draw discard, so that'll get them like cards in the drop zone that you want to pick off. You have Toranaga, which is the energy cycler. Its unique effect states that they can discard a card, otherwise you give 5,000 power to your front row. Basically everyone just gave 5,000 power to the front row. They didn't want to lose the card, so I was like, okay, fine. One of the best cards in this deck, honestly, like really low-key goated and super strong, is Saiyangeki. This is the Ride Cycler, and its skill states that when its attacks will boosted, it could be on anything. You Soul Blast 1. If your opponent has 4 or more cards in the hand, they discard 1. That gives you more discard. It puts pressure on them, ruins their economy system. So, like probably your best grade 2 in this deck by a mile, right? Genkai gives 5,000 power to itself and your token unit like continuously during your turn, so that's one of the means that I said that like these goobers can help make your tokens even more powerful without your opponent's abilities. And you can give anything boost when you place it, and if you don't give this guy boost, you get to soul charge. Soul is really important because you're soul blasting for certain effects, most particularly the Saiyangekis every single turn, and also the effect of Sadamune to make your opponent discard and draw, and Sadamune gets power equal to the shield of the thing they discarded. Then also Tobitachi, where Tobitachi can CB or soul blast depending on if your grade is the same or different from your opponent's Vanguard. So look at the top 7 and add any Shiran Newui. As you can see, there's 11 targets here. That's really good. On top of that, just like Genkai has the same continuous skill where your token in itself give 5,000 power during your turn. Good beatdown, really big token, good stuff. Now we have like some of the nice techie 1-ups, because my 1-up lineup has a lot of 1-of 1s. So this is Saka Fubiki. Discards a card in order to draw a card and gives 3,000 power. But then also if you have one of those face up counter, you get a counter charge. So it's just a counter charge in the deck, really nice. Toga Juji, mean ass card. I won a couple of times because of this card. This card is so wicked. So when your grade 3 unit attacks, you counterblast one and retire it, and your opponent can't call sentinels from hand for its battle. This is really good when you're pairing it with the Mask of Domination token. Now, it's only good if your opponent gives you a grade 3 though, because the only time Mask of Domination token is going to get the grade of that unit is going to be with your Oboro or from the initial ride of Shiran Newui Mukuro, meaning that if you don't bind with the on place a grade 3 or greater, or no, actually grade 3 I mean, this guy isn't going to work with that. And it also can't work with Mukuro because Mukuro is a grade 4. So there's only one of two options. Either they give you that and you do it, or you use it on turn 3 as a pressure tool, because Shiran Newui Oboro is a 27k attacker anyway with Twin Drive. That's pretty good. Its token could get it as well. Or you could also use it as a pressure tool with Shiran Newui. Shiran Newui is a 22k attacker, mostly a 35k attacker, because usually boosting it with like a Tobitachi who's a 13. That's pretty good, but not like that strong. I think it's best if you're using it at the end of your attack pattern. You threw like all of your drive check like triggers onto Shiran Newui, so you have a versatile attack pattern there. It depends on what your opponent's at and what your opponent gives you, which is the thing that I love about this deck. It's very like it's very skill intensive. You have to be able to read game state correctly, and those are my favorite kind of decks. Next up we have Meigetsu. This thing saved me the epic finals. The only reason I won the finals is because I lined this thing so perfectly. I have to drink a little more water because I've been recording for a while, right? So Meigetsu, its first skill states that you can discard as a heal for a G Guardian. There's no G Guardians in V. Moving on. So the real effect is when it put on Guardian Circle from the hand, you can remove a heal trigger from your drop or your hand. And by doing that, it's going to get 10,000 power for every 2 cards in your opponent's hand. But if your opponent's hand has 4 or less cards, you can see if you want to give your Vanguard 5,000 power permanently for that turn. So you're looking at an 18k base. It's one thing to know. Unlike most Protect decks, you actually have a 13k base if you're riding to Shiran Newui Mikuto, because, you know, it's a grade 4. So it's a little bit stronger than the average bear for this clan. So why is this good? So in the finals, I put Loris into a simplified game state, right? And Loris was at 2 cards in hand. They twin drive, go to the 4 cards, and then they're attacking me for 48, right? I throw down Meigetsu. Meigetsu ended up being effectively a 35k shield, because what I did was I removed the heal, I threw it down. They had 4 cards in hand, so you get 20,000 shield for a 30k shielder. Then, because it's still exactly 4, it still counts as 4 or less. So I also got to CB and give an extra 5,000 power to make this an 18k base, which means that against that 45, this was 35 plus 18, which meant that I was there. I was able to guard that. Like, so 30 plus 18 is 48 to 45. Easy enough. That's a really important stipulation, because Saiengeki is also the whole 4 or less thing, right? So you can really hand snipe your opponent here. Speaking of hand snipe, right? Another thing that does that is Matsuba. Now this is the quintet wall for this deck. Now Matsuba once again has the archetypal quintet wall ability. Look at top 5 for CB, call any of the Guardian Circle, shuffle the deck. Now the unique effect is that then, regardless of hits or not, right? Then after you call, your opponent may discard a card from the hand. If they don't, you draw a card and give your Vanguard 5,000 power. So once again, we're getting more defensive power for your Shiran Newui, and you're potentially asking your opponent to F up their hand, right? The funniest thing that I did with Matsuba was there was a turn where one of my opponents just like called their entire hand to the rear circle. So when they attacked initially, I just threw down Matsuba and said, hey, look at that. You can't discard. Let's draw and get 5,000 power. Just more really cool Nubatama crap to annoy the opponent. Kurenai, just Fesco. I ran 2 crit sentinel because you're getting protect markers anyway. So, you know, you already have like 3 guaranteed PGs, and a 4th one potentially if you see the Kurenai, which there's no way to search it, so you just have to kind of like dig into it, which was kind of a problem for me, but you know, every deck needs its weaknesses, right? And then you have like the other Fesco assortments, Kageyusa, Fesco Peel Trigger, all that good stuff, right? So yeah, I think that basically explains what Shiran Newui does. It really screws with your opponent. It's got so many tricks, so much hand drip, ability manipulation as an X factor in case your opponent opponent has really tasty abilities to do, really good resources. It binds from field or drop, which, by the way, because you can bind from drop, one thing that you can do is you can bind these Fesco PG so they can't ever resurrect themselves back as Guardians. So that's another anti-meta thing that you can do right there because of Mikuro and Obero. Really solid stuff, right? I firmly believe this deck is actually not like the strongest thing out there. I think it's pretty solid, but it's somewhat matchup dependent, and also it's a bit slow, especially if you go second, because you're trying to wait until you get to turn 4 with Shiran Newui to really start like accruing, and a lot of these cards aren't actually actively building you hand advantage, right? I mean, shoot, Oboro is a neg unless you can get a drive check, and it's only a plus if you got a twin driver, right? On top of that, this is a break even. This is just making your opponent neg, as does this potentially, so these aren't pluses. This is one of our only pluses. This ride line skill as well, if you can see the Shiran Newui, but it's only for Shiran Newuis, which aren't shield value cards, so you see where I'm going with this, right? So this deck suffers a little bit in the early game card advantage, so you can get rushed down, but if you make it to turn 4 and your opponent gave you setup, the whole battle swings in your favor by that point. It absolutely, pun intended, dominates. So this don't judge me, I brought Glendios, and this deck went undefeated in the V tournament. The reason why is because I made a meta call. You remember that meta call from earlier where I said it was going to be a slow format? Well, I also made another meta call. I thought that Excel decks ain't crap. I thought that it was going to be full of Force and Protect decks, and I mean, there was a lot of Force and Protect decks, so that was mostly correct. So I thought, you know what really screws it over? Omega locking your opponent's fields. Now, Glendios here, this, everyone knows what Glendios does, right? It Omega locks, it tries to achieve the haha funny world end alternate win condition, uses reverse units. It's really cool. It's kind of like Fashion Guard on which reverse units you use, right? So yeah, Glendios worked extremely well during this tournament. This sucker was just locking left and right, and I mean, just to explain, one of the things about this sucker that is kind of like unfortunate is when your reverse unit is placed, you can only lock something that's not on an additional rear circle. So in order to get rear circles, you have to either like lock from like Photon, which is a new card I'm going to explain, or also Craving Claw to exchange locks. So, you know, we know what these do, right? And these reverses are just in order of like ones that I like stylistically speaking. Yeah, a lot of like menacing dragons and epic stuff. I'm not playing a lot of the waifu baity stuff, even though I totally could have. I'm like, whatever. This deck is not here to goon, it's to win. Now let me explain some of the Starvader choices here, right? And first off, we've got Zirconium. Now, Zirconium, everyone knows what Zirconium does, but I need to just say that this is probably one of the best cards in this deck, flat out. It's TBs if you got a Starvader. Your opponent looks at the top card of the deck and places on an open rear circle as locked. So this is like Cold Death Dragon for you. It gets you those guaranteed extra locks that I think just won me half of my matchups flat out on its own, because then Glendios would just Omega lock those suckers. Even if you ride it, it's still a good ride because it forces them to get a card out there to be locked target later on. So even though they'll have a chance to unlock it, by the time they have a chance to unlock it, Glendios just locks it again on the next turn. And one of the funny things about Zirconium is that if they dare to block it in the back row and be cheeky about it, you can draw a card and get Zirconium 10,000 power. And Zirconium also makes the original critical of your Starvader Vanguard too, as long as they've got a lock card. And they will always have a lock card because it's Glendios. Nice, right? Magna Hollow searches you a reverse unit from deck by CB1 on place, so good stuff here. And then you've got Worldline Dragon. Worldline Dragon Soul Blast discards a reverse unit. Look at top 7, add 2 Starvaders, so that can search out your other Starvaders, which include the freaking the reverse searchers. So, you know, it's the searchers who search the searchers. Rubidium searches on top 7 for reverse and also makes all of your reverses have intercept and 10k shield. So as long as Rubidium isn't running into like a control matchup, this card's going to be super valuable to make your reverses useful, especially because Glendios is formable Mega Lock, Soul Blast, and reverse it, and chooses a reverse in the drop zone and binds it. So you kind of need to get those in there somehow, and you preferably don't want to just overcall them. So getting them as 10k intercepts is just like optimal value for you, right? It's a very efficient use of those cards. Now, one thing to note is you can only bind reverses that are a different name. So I don't get why they did this, but they really want you to play different reverses. Now, reverses have no abilities in this deck. If you ride them, they don't twin drive, they don't give you markers, they don't give you any of that, right? They don't get their effects, they're just vanilla, so you absolutely need to ride Glendios. But it's like, I guess we're just trying to like play the Highlander on it or whatever, so that's another reason why I'm running this. I went a little risque with it and ran only 7 reverses because I'm trying to min-max his ratio to allow for as much Starvader versatility as humanly possible, because you can really run into too many reverse units, not just in the early game where they clock up your hand, but even the late game where it's like, I only need a couple of these suckers, but there's like 5 in the hand, and it's like, yeah, they're shields, but the moment Rubidium goes bye-bye, they're not shields anymore, so you know, it kind of sucks, right? So I think 7 is probably the optimal number. It's a little on the low side, but if you play right, it should be enough to get you where you need to go, right? Now let's go ahead and talk about some of the one of the new cards here, right? Because this new card definitely changes the ballpark a little bit. So this is Companion Starvader Photon. This is the Legion mate to the Legion Leader Garnet Star, which is also in this set, right? And it was in the first V Revival set that we had, which was Clan Collection Volumes 9 and 10 to be specific for Starvaders, is Link Jokers and Even Clan. Now, this says that when placed on Vanguard rear circle, as with these other grade 2s, how about that? You can discard a card from the hand, and your opponent chooses one of their units and locks it. Well, rear guards and locks it. Then, if they couldn't lock a card, you draw and you give your Vanguard 5,000 power. So you force another lock from this, and if you couldn't lock, you get to make up for your discard and get some power there. Realistically speaking, the power and the draw is like nice cycle and filter, so let's not underestimate it. And the discard actually can get you a reverse in there to initially Omega lock with Omega Glendios there. This is also another one of the ways where if they don't have like many cards on field, they may be forced to lock that pesky Excel circle card. So that's really good there. This is also paired with Cravenclaw. Now, Cravenclaw is another one of the MVPs of the deck. Whenever its attacker, the attack and boosted hits, you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, add a Starvader. Now, this actually can whiff a little bit more than the average Starvader deck because you're running these reverses, but because you're searching them off the effects of like Magnet Hollow and Rubidium, it's not going to cuck you that often. It just could cuck you a little often, right? But still, in addition to this really amazing effect, overall free plussing is free plussing. This deck also has a way to exchange locks, because Cravenclaw can put itself into the soul of the opponent's grade 3 or greater to unlock their card and then choose a different card and lock it instead, right? So this means that you can actually nail those Excel circle units because you get to choose. Your opponent doesn't choose on this one, you get to choose. So by doing this, sure, you get rid of this optimal booster, but you get to choose those Excel circle cards, and that's really nice. That's the saving grace of this deck in the Excel matchup, right? In case I do have to run an Excel, which my first round was against Yasuie, so yeah, that was kind of a bad time, not gonna lie, but it managed to clutch up somehow. So this card is super fundamental. This, along with Zirconium, just make up the backbone of V-Series Starvaders anyway. Magna Hollow, Rubidium, and Worldline are your reverse engine stuff, and then Photon is also like just really nifty overall. And actually, speaking of, let me just bring up, Photon's second skill states that at the end of the battle, your Vanguard with Starvader attacks, if your opponent has a lock card, you can put it on the bottom of your deck to bounce back a Starvader rearguard. That's really sick, right? Because you get to reignite the on-play skills of Magna Hollow or Zirconium. You could use it to also reignite Worldline Dragon if you must. If you don't have Intercept anyway, I mean, you could just bounce back Rubidium if Rubidium doesn't have any reverse units to use, but you know, that's kind of niche. It's mainly for these 3 on placers, right? I particularly like it with Zirconium because people like to swing on Zirconium and get rid of this dude because he has like the crit and stuff like that. So, you know, they want to shut down Omega Glendios' extra critical. So just do this and don't let them do that, right? And one thing to note is that because at the end of the battle your Vanguard Starvader attacks, Photon doesn't need to be in the front row. That's really good, because what you can do then is you can have this guy in the back row bounce back Photon from the front row, and now the only thing left on your front row is usually a reverse unit. They have to call for a lock, and so it's like, well, what are they going to do? They certainly don't want to attack into it. It's an 18k base because of Glendios, and that reverse unit kind of wants to be the drop zone, so you know, they kind of be doing you a favor. They attacked into it, so really good control of your board and combo resources. So just overall a really cohesive deck. We do have one Fesco PG here, but I can only do the one, unfortunately, because it's a really tight list, right? So I try to make space where I can. We do have one Pleiades, which is Fesco Draw Trigger. This with Cravenclaw is really nice because you do Soul Blast a fair bit. Glendios is Soul Blasting every time you Omega Lock, and you do generally proc this like about 3 to 4, maybe 5 times, so you're gonna need a couple of extra soul in the late game, especially if you're using Worldline Dragon, which is ironically like more expensive than the CBs, because yeah, your soul's a little bit limited. So yeah, definitely use the soul effects of Craving Claw and Pleiades if you've got a chance. And then from there, just 8 criticals, 2 Fesco heals, 2 normal heals, just good stuff. I threw in the Micro Holt Draco kit as the starter though, because I wanted people to initially think I wasn't playing Glendios, so that when I start playing Glendios crap, they realize their folly. And yeah, that's about that. So overall, really fun tournament, really strong matchups, right? This tournament was so fun. This format is so great. Everyone enjoyed this. This has unironically become more popular of a format to play than standard in our server, because, you know, standard, for better or for worse, has become somewhat on the boring side. So much beatdown. Set 10 was a little disappointing in his reveals overall. Like, Liel is okay. Dragold is nice, but, you know, not like super game breaking. And then a lot of other stuff are just beat down and get extra drives and, you know, just do this restand multi-attack nonsense. That's all what they all do, right? But like, for instance, look at the decks that came out here, right? We have like this combo deck that does like a lot of like deck stack casino stuff, right? This is doing combo plays with the stage and the soul, although it's a little bit basic. This one is doing the revelation gimmicks and trying to assemble particular grades in your soul, while also assembling the exact top decks and getting like cool like toolbox multis, right? This one is literally just Vanguard go burr. This one is using protect markers, like protect 2s, and has like this resurrection self-ping style that also like comes in with just a 3 attack turn like guard restrict. This is another 3 attack turner most of the time, which is just focusing on plussing and a really interesting guard restrict. So multiple 3 attack decks that made a top cut. This one is a 3 attack deck that won the whole tournament and actually went undefeated. And then of course you had Shiran Newui, which is taking literally your opponent's effects and using it for yourself. Like, look at all these interesting decks that made it into top cut that aren't just purely beatdown focused, right? And I mean purely because, like, yeah, some of them do beat down, but they also beat down in interesting ways. It's just typical like restand, and that's the end of the day, right? Like, and all these decks are way more interesting than something like non-clear. But I digress. Let me not rant on V series too much, because that's not the point of this video. I just mean that to say that this is really fun, and a lot of people are really catching on to it. So to those of you out in the audience here, at the conclusion of this video, let me just say this. If you want like a fun and fresh format where you feel like it can give you a wide assortment of different build options and is continuing to get support, both tournament support, errata restriction list support, card support, obviously, and also support other ways like feature deck lists and some fight nights in the future, all that is what V Revival has going for it. So if you want to be a part of the party, then definitely check out my link to my Discord down in the description below. Totally free to join, and just go around and ask around for project news. And we got a lot of helpful folks there who will be able to guide you and get you on the process to starting your V Revival journey. And with all that said, that's going to do it for this tournament results video. I hope you like these results and, you know, some of the in-depth analysis that we have with these decks here. It's definitely a little bit different because we're talking about cards that aren't even like technically official, but I mean, shoot, official is only relative, right? As far as our tournament circuits go, these are official cards. So if that's enough for you, then yeah, I mean, these are indeed tournament results, right? And with all that said, if you're looking for the Vanguard content, then look no further. My channel does all sorts of Vanguard content. We do top 10s, discussions, fight nights, custom card reviews, anime reactions, like the one that's actually happening a little bit here. Today's Friday, my dudes. So if any of that interests you, then check it out. If you like what you see, consider leaving a subscribe and turn on notification bell for next time I upload a video. And that's it. Take care, and God bless y'all.